Guys, I see more people joining, so we'll give it a couple of minutes before we get started. So we have a good one today. Hope everyone's enjoying their Tuesday so far.
I imagine we've got quite an international audience today as well.
Definitely, yeah. So thank you for joining us if it's the morning or the night, whatever time zone you're in.
Well, we know there's at least 2 of us in the UK, right?
Exactly. 2 people for dinner time. Great. Okay, so I think we can get started and let some more people come in. So I'm Nina. I work at LearnDash. Thank you all for attending. We have a very exciting topic today, cohort-based online courses. Cohort-based learning strategies for online courses is proven way to create a community of learners who will be able to retain and apply their learnings after course completion. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. So we have some subject matter experts with us today to discuss the benefits of cohort-based learning, the power of community, and then how to implement these courses into your LearnDash platform. So with us today, we have Andy Jack, who is co-founder of Training Spark and Candle Digital. He spent nearly 20 years designing, building, and scaling online learning products and courses. He's passionate about the potential of online learning to transform lives and help people reach their full potential. We also have Martin Meller, founder of Meller Financial Training, who is a chartered accountant with more than 25 years of experience. He specializes in helping people make more sense of finance and financial jargon. Martin has brought his subject matter expertise to the training arena for 10 years now, and he has been delivering cohort-based training successfully for the last 3 years. So thank you both, Andy and Martin, for being with us today. So we can get started when you guys are ready. Thank you.
Awesome. Hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's great to see so many of you here from all around the world to learn a little bit more about cohort-based online courses. It's something we're really passionate about. I'm looking forward to sharing you about what we've learned over the years of creating these things, and Martin showing his experience as well. So, as Nina said, I'm Andy Jack, and I'm one of the co-founders of Training Spark. As Nina says, we've spent 20 years designing, building, and scaling online learning products, and you know what? We've picked up a lot of stories along the way and a few scars as well. So that's something that we're going to bring into it. I've also studied digital education at master's level. So I feel like I've got a good grasp of not only learning technologies, but also approaches to online education too. Just to give you a quick introduction to Training Spark, it's actually a spin-off from our online learning agency business, Candle Digital. And at Candle Digital, we found that we were developing new features and requests for clients on top of the core LearnDash and WordPress platform that we use. We thought it could benefit, other people could benefit from our development work, other course creators and course builders. So over the years, we've been releasing these developments in the form of plugins through the Training Spark brand. We also have a popular YouTube channel where we provide guides on how to get the most from your LearnDash platform. And I'm really passionate about online learning. It's what we do day in, day out. And I'm really passionate about the transformative impact of the online learning, when done well, can have on people. We're also very keen fans of LearnDash as a tool to share expertise at scale. So I want to say a big thank you to the LearnDash team for the opportunity to speak with you today. But let's get into cohort-based learning. So this is a format that we've been baking into our client projects for some time now, and with increasing regularity. We've learned a lot through the various client projects we've done. And the screenshot you can actually see in front of you is an example of a cohort-based course or a platform that we created for a client, Deborah Ogden, who is a personal brand specialist. If anyone's wondering, that site was built in LearnDash using the Buddy Boss theme, custom CSS, and used Cohort Manager as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about it. So over the next 30, 40 minutes, my aim is to give you some clarity on why you should seriously consider cohort-based courses as part of your online offering. And if you do want to try this, then how to implement it. Before I get started, there's something I really want to get across. You or your clients have typically spent a lifetime gathering experience and insights that can be transformational for your audience. And that expertise deserves to be shared. Now, e-learning, online courses, whatever you want to call it, they're a great way to package and distribute your valuable expertise at scale. However, we believe that one of online learning's greatest strengths can also be its Achilles heel. And that's the fact that typically online learning is available anytime and anywhere. So what do I mean by that? I would argue that these days we live in an attention-based economy, and there can be lots of barriers to learners completing or getting full value from your online courses. Now, one of the challenges could be the course itself. It could feel overwhelming. Someone could be overwhelmed by the breadth of the subject content. They may struggle to progress because they may not grasp certain concepts, or they don't perhaps have the support they need to really be a success in the course. These things can all stop people from completing. Now, we all know, and I'm guilty as charged, we often start online courses with the best of intentions, full of mojo, full of gusto, wanting to crack on. But as time progresses, motivation can wane a little bit, and sometimes it can feel a bit of a slog to get to the end. There could be other things getting in the way. We often assume that our students have excellent study skills and know what they need to do to get full value from the program. They may struggle getting into a rhythm. They may struggle with time management. And those things can always get in the way too. And then what gets in most people's way is just life itself, Netflix, family commitments, a couple of beers in the evening. They're all competing for our time and attention. But we found that cohort-based learning can be a useful antidote to some of those challenges. So what is cohort-based learning? Probably a good place to start. So cohort-based learning is where people study together, or what we call in the online learning world, synchronously. So typically it's based around a schedule with a fixed start date and a fixed end date. So you'll have probably studied a cohort-based format, at college or university. That's the classic example. So a semester starts in January, for example. It finishes in March. And at the end of it, you will have learned about X, Y, and Z, and probably have a credential that reflects that as well. So you're learning together, and importantly, with a bunch of your peers, studying the same subject over the same period of time. But compared to face-to-face, there are some nuances to the delivery of a cohort-based course that's delivered entirely online. So you could just take a typical on-demand online course and carve that into a schedule. So you could separate into different weeks, for example. You take your online content, you take the interactive activities, if you're using something like H5P, you use your LearnDash quizzes and put them in a structure over a set period of time. And in essence, that's just, dripped content or dripped lessons. And many LMSs like LearnDash include that out of the box. But then you've got to think about the social aspects. And this is where some of the real magic of cohort-based learning comes out, because this is the opportunity you have for people to interact. When you've got people studying together at the same time, use that to your advantage. So those interactions could take the form of on-screen discussions. So what we do with some of our clients when we're designing online learning experiences is you may introduce a topic on a page. You may have a video, some interactive elements. Then what you could do is you could prompt or instigate a discussion on that same page about the topic they just learnt about. And this can start a discussion from the cohort. So this is an example from one of our recent client projects. So we work with a chap that does a lot of work in the automotive sector. And after they'd studied a certain concept, we asked them a question. And then people have responded. And although you can't see it in the example here, people started to respond to each other's comments. And so we're weaving in this sense of not only learning from the course content, but learning from each other. And people are sharing their context, their experiences, their challenges. And it adds a real richness to the whole learning experience. So that's where you've got discussions going on directly on the page. You could also add a wider community to it. So you could add that into your platform. So we use BuddyBoss quite heavily. So if you wanted to have a forum or related to the course itself, you can bring that in. Slightly less connected to the course content per se, but it's still in there. Or you could add an external community. So some of our clients add LinkedIn groups, they add WhatsApp groups, Slack channels. It's all about providing a space where people that have a common bond can connect and share. But I think the cohort-based course format really comes to life and is very powerful when you introduce live video calls. So given learners are studying to a specific schedule or a cadence in cohort-based learning, many of our clients choose to add to that with a live video workshop. So they would typically be one every week or every 2 weeks, depending on the length or the duration of the course. And they're usually around 45 minutes to an hour. Now, this call is magic. It brings a vast number of benefits to your online learning experience, and we're going to dig into that shortly. But we're finding this combination of self-study online content, community, and live video calls are becoming increasingly popular. And it's a format we find that we're often advocating for and banging the drum for, just because it seems to generate the best results. But I think you've heard enough from me. So I'd like to introduce you to Martin Meller, who is a client. Martin runs Meller Financial Training and has adopted a cohort-based format into his courses. So over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Andy. And hi, everyone. Great to have the opportunity to speak to you all. So, as Andy says, I specialize in helping people increase their financial literacy. And by financial literacy, I mean in a business context. So, if you're a manager in a business, or you own a business, or you're a salesperson, how can you get a better handle on understanding the profitability of the business, or what drives the profitability of the business, understanding all of this myriad of financial language and jargon and technical speak that means that there's so many people out there that when it comes to discussing finance, they just feel like they don't even know where to start. They feel bamboozled by it. They feel completely out of their depth. So maybe that's something that resonates with people on the call today. If it does, give me a thumbs up, I guess. And I would do that with a whole host of clients, some really big businesses that you may have heard of. So American Express, KPMG, the UK government. But I also do it with people that run their own business where it's one or two people in a company. So what I'd like to do now is kind of step you through how my version of cohort-based learning works and how it's come about. So I developed with Andy and Candle Digital and Training Spark a self-paced online learning tool. And we were scratching our heads around, Andy, the slide seems to have gone backwards rather than forwards. There we go. We were scratching our heads about really having impact, and it was exactly some of the challenges that Andy was describing earlier. So let's face it, finance is not a subject that is kind of top of mind for most people. It's not something that people bound home with enthusiasm and think, I'm going to log on and do my online learning. So whereas was really proud of the tool that we'd built, and lots of effort and time and thought went into that tool and how it works, and that definitely has a place. What we found was that people would get so far and then they would put it down and not come back to it, or not have the drive to come back to it. And so we started to work on the idea of it being a cohort-based course. And what works for my content and my course is to break it down into 4 blocks of learning. Now, what I would say is that took a little bit of thought and effort and time to get the right structure so that we didn't have double the amount of effort in one block than we had in the previous block. So finding the right cadence, the right structure, the right breakdown, where you're keeping people engaged, you're keeping people like they feel like they're making progress, where you're giving them the opportunity to gain feedback, to share what they've thought, suddenly takes this thing that existed on its own and makes it way more powerful. So we have these 4 blocks of content. And what I would do is top and tail that with a live video call, as Andy describes. So we would have one before we get going. That's really light touch, just introducing people to the technology, showing them what it's going to look like, telling them and explaining how it's going to work, what we're going to ask of them, the age-old learning kind of term of contracting, getting people to buy into the fact that actually, do you know what, guys, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit vulnerable. I'm going to ask you to show up for these next 4 weekly calls, 45 minutes out of your week. That's all I'm asking for. But I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable, and I'm going to ask you to share what worked for you, what didn't work for you, what did you have questions about, what did you have challenges with, how can we relate this to what you do in your job? And that's where the magic comes, because we take it from just being a learning course that people complete into something that has impact, into something that they can take away and use in their real life, in their day-to-day work. We've had people in the past bring along a real world problem of something that they're working on. They discuss it with their colleagues. As Andy said, I've got people that have created their own communities. We've got our own community, but people that have created their own working groups that when the course is done and dusted, they're going to meet up and they're going to discuss challenges in their role, and they're going to be a support network for each other. So what we've found is it smashes it from a completion rate. We have completion rates of more than 95%. And that cadence, so having the right rhythm, the right pace, the right structure, people don't want to be the one that turns up to the call and they've not gone through the content. And the more that we make it that safe space for them to say, do you know what, I still don't get this bit. And usually what happens then is when someone says that, someone else starts like, oh, do you know what, I found that as well. Whereas historically, they maybe would have stayed quiet. So the live calls enable me to respond to questions, to deal with challenges, and I learn stuff as well. Because what I find is that the way in which I facilitate those courses changes and evolves. The more I've effectively building up a knowledge bank for put my teeth in for facilitation of those calls, and every time I feel like I get better. So from my perspective, the static content, the self-paced learning, that does all the heavy lifting. That gives everyone a common level of understanding. It gives us some ubiquity. It levels off peaks and troughs of individuals' knowledge, and that then enables me to really hone in on the value add during the live calls.
Awesome. And then in terms of impact, the emails at the end, Martin?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, so what we don't want is people to feel like the end of the formal learning is the end of the course. So we deliberately, strategically give people access. We give them a license to that system for 12 further months. I encourage every learner to use that system as much as they can. And so nudge emails are a brilliant way of just prompting people. We've started giving them bonus bits of content, extra little tasks, extra little games, extra little bits of gamification, all just ways of drawing people back in. Because with the best will in the world, particularly in my subject area, there's a limit to how much people will retain, even within a structure like this. So we want to make sure we maximize that impact. So some of the structure and the tools and the functionality of LearnDash really helps us to keep nudging people, keep touching them, keep prompting them, keep asking them to engage. And therefore, the satisfaction scores that we get from people that have been through this are off the charts, absolutely off the charts.
And it's about staying on the radar, isn't it? You know, everyone's got their busy daily lives, but if you can almost interrupt that with a, hey, we studied this 6 months ago, how are you getting on with it? Or, have you come across the term balance sheet, or how's your budget going? It's just a way of almost interrupting their daily life to stay on the radar.
Well, and the other beauty of it is, Andy, it's not like people are dealing with this stuff every day of their life. So it's about giving them the opportunity and the platform to engage with when it fits for them and when it suits them. And so we've got all of the best bits of the flexibility of on demand, but with a structure and a cadence and a rhythm and a completion that massively upskills people. And then when you combine that with community, that's where the magic happens.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. So I just wanted to build on Martin's experience and dig into 3 key aspects of cohort-based courses and why we find this format to be very powerful. So the first one, as Martin's talked about, is connection. So a key part of a cohort-based course format is being able to interact with other students on the course. Now, if they are taking the course at the same time, they naturally have something in common. They might have the same challenges, they might need the same skill set, they might be at the same stage of life, who knows? Maybe they just want to achieve the same things. And by bringing them together, they can share their own stories, context and challenges, implementing what you're teaching as a course creator into their daily or working lives. So that connection can naturally be fostered through the live calls, but you have other tools you can use, like the comments and the social groups we mentioned earlier, to really foster that and scaffold that experience. Now, I always think about, we're hardwired as humans to be social creatures, yet on-demand online learning sometimes takes that away. It can feel quite isolated and lonely at times, which for many course topics is absolutely fine. There's no need for this environment, but perhaps not for all. And perhaps that's where a cohort-based course format can come in. And as Martin said, I'd also like to say that these connections that are forged between the learners can go beyond your intervention as a course creator. So for many of our clients, as Martin has said, they have communities that are ongoing. That WhatsApp channel where everyone connected and shared little tips keeps on going, and they're exploring or sharing their challenges, 6-12 months down the line, and still harking back to what Martin has taught them so many months ago. So that's connection. And there's also connection with the course tutor or the subject expert. So as Martin said, you can respond in real time to any questions the learner might have on those video calls. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Martin, but on the calls, you can get into the interesting stuff. I mean, Martin could spend all his time on Zoom explaining the vocabulary or the jargon of finance, what is a balance sheet. But using the calls, he can get into the weeds, he can get into the context, he can get into the application of the topic rather than just the high level theoretical stuff. Martin, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a few things on this. So the calls are a great way to firstly reinforce what people have learned. Secondly, this is using Mentimeter, which some of you may be aware of. So try and keep those calls as interactive as possible. What I don't want is someone sat quietly on the call. And one of the things I didn't say a few minutes ago is I like to work with cohorts of 8 to 10 people maximum, small groups, make it a safe space, give them the platform to feel safe talking. But therefore, within that, I want everyone contributing. And so interactive tools like Mentimeter are a really great way. And the other thing that I constantly come back to, and again, this is really powerful in my world, is getting us away from the theory and into the practical. So I talk about real businesses, real companies, their business, their company. We look at real figures. We apply the learning to the real world because it's all about having impact. And so much financial training that is out there is theoretical. Well, with the best will in the world, someone understanding the construct of a balance sheet, it isn't that helpful to them in their day-to-day life. So it's about trying to have impact, trying to make it as engaging and as interactive as possible.
And you bring a lot of news topics in, don't you, as well? What's happened in the previous week?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. As a big company failed, there was a big construction company went bust in the UK only last week. So that would be a valid topic. I would make it geographically specific. So when I'm talking to American Express clients, for example, some of them are in the States, but some of them might be in Argentina or Mexico or Indonesia or Malaysia. So we're using examples that are relevant to those people in that geography. And again, that just makes it have so much more impact.
Awesome. So that's connection. That's the first of our 3 key factors in cohort-based learning. The second one is motivation. So if we use Martin's completion rates as a metric for success, it's a good metric, there are other metrics, but the switch to cohort-based format has had a big bearing and a big impact on Martin. So you may have heard of Parkinson's law. Now, the official line is it's work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. And that's a bit of a word salad. But in essence, if you've got 6 months to do something, it'll probably take you 6 months. If you've got 1 week to do it, it'll probably take you 1 week. If we use this talk I'm now presenting and these slides, this has been booked in for several months. How long do you think I started working on it? How long has it taken me? I was working on it today. So there's nothing like a deadline to provoke action. And by chunking up and having a set cadence, people should study. So it really helps. I found it really helps learning experience, and it provides quite an important structure for people to work towards. And being candid, online on-demand e-learning can sometimes suffer from that. Without a specific endpoint and without chunked up content along the way, we know that many just never get finished. And we see the stats, when it comes to MOOCs, massive open online courses, their completion rates are usually 3 to 5%, and there's a reason for that. Another aspect to consider in terms of motivation is the video calls. As Martin says, no one really wants to turn up on the calls having not done anything. You found that out. You found that, Martin, haven't you?
Massively, yeah. The power of the collective and the fear of letting down your teammates is a great driver.
Yeah, because students, in an on-demand course, they're only really accountable to themselves. Now they're in a community of learners and tutors, so they're accountable to others to some extent. It's like, if I wanted to eat healthy or get fit, then, I could download a fitness plan off the internet. There's loads of them, or I could watch some videos from YouTube. But sometimes you need someone to guide you, to tailor it for you, and to hold you accountable. And that's why personal trainers exist. And I think that's one of the key success factors of cohort-based courses too. And then finally, on motivation, there's one fringe benefit that people often overlook, course creators, particularly those that are more in the commercial side of online learning. And that's around enrollment and purchase. And it's because a cohort-based course follows a schedule. So a cohort-based course may only, by its very nature, happen several times a year. So in England, we have a massive festival, a music festival called Glastonbury. I imagine in the States, it's the Lollapalooza of the States. So whenever the tickets go on sale for Glastonbury, they sell out within minutes of going online. And why is that? It's down to 2 things. It's down to deadlines and scarcity. And a cohort-based course has these attributes too. There's only going to be so many times a year an individual can join. And there's only going to be a certain number of people you probably want on your cohort-based course, whether that's 6, 60 or 600. But there is going to be a ceiling to that. And so that can really foster demand for a product. If something is finite and scarce, it's a premium product, and a premium product has value, and you can charge a premium product a premium price for. So there are commercial benefits we found as well to a cohort-based course format. The pushback I get is course creators often say, well, I'm going to miss out on bookings. But what you're trying to do is, when you're trying to sell anything, you're trying to create demand and supply tension. And there's different levers you can do to do that. So some, products that are available all the time typically use discounting. So if you go to Udemy, you'll find that every single course on Udemy is discounted by maybe 80, 90%. And that's because they've got no other levers to pull on to create some urgency around purchase. If you've got a cohort-based course, you need to sign up today, otherwise you're going to miss the deadline, or there's only so many spaces available. So you can create a demand and supply tension that you can use to your advantage from a commercial perspective as well. So that's motivation. The final one is about impact. Now, Martin's talked a little bit about that, but impact for us as an online learning agency is really important to us. We don't want to create stuff that people don't care about and doesn't make a dent in the universe. That's really important to us. So if we consider the development of any skill, it needs 2 core things: practice and feedback. To use an example, imagine I was learning to cook a pad thai. So I need to practice that. Obviously, I need to chop the ingredients. I need to make a paste. I need to put oil in my wok. I need to heat up the oil, and I need to cook it in my wok. And now I can't just read a recipe book, and I actually have to go into the kitchen and do it. You know, you can't read a car manual and expect to know how to drive the car. And that might seem really patronizing and obvious, but how many online courses don't really facilitate or acknowledge that opportunity for practice? So because a cohort-based course is spread out over time and structured in a regular cadence, the student has time to practice what has been taught in the real world. They can try it, they can get it right, they can get it wrong, and they can use that to inform their development. So if you consider what Martin does, you know, helping people with financial confidence, once they've got basic understanding of, you know, financial terms, they can then go and have conversations and, oh, I did understand that. Oh, what about this? And it starts to layer and scaffold, and they can bring those findings back into the course. So it really starts to layer up. The other thing is feedback. And this feedback can come, you know, from yourself. It can also come from a partner or friend. So the feedback when I cook my pad thai for the first time, I take a bite. Oh, this tastes far too salty, too much fish sauce. I can also ask my friends, is it any good? You know, what would you change? Again, it's actually about practicing the output in the real world and getting good feedback to help inform what you need to change for the future. You know, if I take a cooking class, I can also get direction from a tutor, someone who's observing it. And that's almost the role that Martin would play in those live sessions. And that's just the direction and making sure I'm staying on course all the way through it. So a cohort-based course can also provide opportunities for practice and feedback. Finally, on impact, there's just a couple of things I want to acknowledge that really play to the cohort-based course format strength. The first one is they're not just learning from you. You're not the sage on the stage. You know, they are learning from each other. And that can help understand, oh, in your small business world, how does that work? Or, you know, you work for a large company on the NASDAQ. How does this finance conversations happen in your world? So they can learn from each other, share, and it's not just about the content itself. And the second is because of its nature, it's spread over time, you can orientate your learning around projects rather than topics. So you can use it to, you know, almost, if it's a 4-week course, what's the outcome someone wants to achieve over those 4 weeks? And maybe there's a tangible output. If it's about marketing, maybe at the end you can create a marketing plan. You've got a marketing plan for your business and a lot of social media assets, for example. And so for all those reasons, you know, the connection, accountability, and for impact, you can find that you'll get a better and long-lasting impact through a cohort-based course format. So, as Martin said, one thing I just want to touch on here is my recommendation. If you know I've sold cohort-based learning towards you as a format, before you jump in, just take a step back and rethink your approach. It would be really easy to go away, right? Andy said we should do this. To go away, look at your on-demand course and say, right, I'm going to carve it into 4 and I'm just going to deliver it like that. I would really encourage you as an online learning designer is to take the mindset of trying to design learning experiences rather than learning content. So content is abundant. There's so much of it in the world. And if you're trying to sell an online course based on content alone and you're struggling to get traction, it's probably because there are alternatives out there. Udemy courses, a YouTube series, even ChatGPT, they're probably doing it cheaper or free and are doing enough of a job to satisfy the customer, and they don't see the why I should pay the premium to do your course. So therefore, we need to approach our learning design as one of experience. Experiences are harder to replicate. An experience, joining a community, connecting with other learners, being held accountable, having stuff customized and being able to ask questions. These things are scarce and therefore are valuable, and people pay for things that are valuable. So before I wrap up and talk a little bit more about the implementation, Martin, over to you in terms of any top tips you want to impart about your experiences in delivering cohort-based courses.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I suppose I'm gonna give you 4 Fs, guys, as my top tips. So my first F is for flexibility. So I would always plan ahead of those live calls. But equally, I try not to over plan ahead of those live calls, because actually what people don't want in a live call is me delivering to them. What we want is to allow ourselves the space to let the conversation go where we want it to go. So I would always have stuff in my back pocket that I know I can go to, and I have things that I know work as prompts and levers that I can pull, that having flexibility. No two live sessions are the same. So I will typically run two cohorts in parallel at the same time. So they'll both be going through the blocks of content at the same time, and then I would have the calls at different points in the same week. They're never the same. They're never the same. So allowing some flexibility to allow those people to talk about what they want to talk about is really important. Secondly, that leads into facilitation. So as we've said several times through the course of this session, facilitation of those live calls becomes a really powerful element of the offering. So take some time and think about the tools that you might use, the way in which you might use them, the points that you want to make, and potentially even undertake some facilitation skills training yourself if you're going to be the one that's delivering, or recruit really appropriately the people that are going to facilitate those sessions, because they're the things that will take it and elevate the learning experience for the learners. The third thing is to be focused. So as we've said, the calls that I run are no longer than 45 minutes. Make them short, make them snappy, make them powerful, make them impactful. The last thing you want is people effectively looking at their watch whilst they're on those calls going, get me out of here. I want to get away from this conversation. 45 minutes, I find, is a brilliant time slot. It's not too short. You can get into some depth. You can go down and look at things that in particular people want to look at, but you're not taking up a boatload of time and resource for people. And the final F would be around the features. It would be really easy for me to work with some of the amazing features and tools that are embedded in LearnDash, embedded in the Training Spark systems, embedded in my platform, and kind of go, here you go, everyone, have it all at once. But actually, sometimes less is more. So don't see it as an opportunity to show off absolutely everything that you've got in your tool bag. Think about that learning experience at the heart of it. And as I say, what you'll find is the more that you deliver the cohorts, the more you build up your wealth and your bank of knowledge and experience of what's going to work and what's powerful and what has less impact. So 4 Fs: flexibility, facilitation, focused, and features.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. So here's just a quick summary. I won't label this. I think hopefully I've sold cohort-based formats to some of you. There are loads of benefits for learners. There are loads of benefits for educators. I would say that there are downsides. Let's be honest, it's not the holy grail, and it isn't appropriate for all courses. There are constraints on the number of people who can do a course, but my challenge to that would be you can charge premium pricing. The opportunity there is why don't you do both? Try both. So you can have one which is a premium product, which is your cohort-based course, which involves more of your time as a tutor. But you could also have an on-demand course which has zero time from yourself other than perhaps some support. But maybe try 2 different products at 2 different price points and see how it's going to be. And obviously, if you are involved in a cohort-based course, you do need to have some kind of tutor resource, whether it's just to manage the community or you also want to bring the live calls in. Again, I personally think that's offset by some of the opportunities you have. It's just as an educator, it's just a hell of a lot more enjoyable to have that connection with your learners, to understand what they're going through, and using that to almost inform future product development. That can be invaluable. But let you guys be the judge of that. So in terms of this tech stack that we use to deliver this, now there may be alternatives out there, but this is just what we use at Candle Digital. So we use LearnDash, obviously. It's the core of our WordPress-based learning platform. So LearnDash is going to be the place where you build your courses, manage your learning content, and assign your learners into groups. We use BuddyBoss. So this brings for us the sense of social groups that we use throughout the learning experience. It also brings social profiles. And we use this to add comments to pages and some of the wider community aspects as well. Then we've got Cohort Manager, which is one of Training Spark's, one of our plugins at Training Spark, and I'll touch on that a little bit more. I also just wanted to mention Events Calendar. So Events Calendar is it's another stellar WP product like LearnDash, and we use that with WooCommerce. So as a way of selling spaces on individual cohorts. So we find that works really, really well. That's Events Calendar with WooCommerce, and then we often use Stripe as the payment gateway. There may be alternatives to that tech stack. That's just what we use, and I would suggest, the beauty of open source and the WordPress ecosystem is there's often different tools that you can use to fill in the functionality gaps or get it to do what you want. But that's what we use. So just on Cohort Manager, we create a Cohort Manager and we use it. What we do is we create something called Cohort Workflows using that plugin. So it allows you to use the same base course. So you're not having to clone a course for every single cohort. But what you do is you create a unique workflow for each cohort that goes through that course. So it allows you to drip content, unlock your lessons basically at a certain schedule. You can also, unlock further other lessons. You can send email chains. It just allows you to create an individual workflow for each individual cohort that you have. And it's all available in one single dashboard rather than having to go into each lesson individually. What we've also done is we've also added shortcodes. So if you want a piece of content to display on a page or a topic in LearnDash that's specific to that cohort, then you can do that using shortcodes. So it could be the link to the Zoom call. It could be a video of the recording of the video call that's happened for that cohort. It could also be, if one cohort is specifically around a certain area or a certain business, so perhaps manufacturing, you could drop in specific content onto the page without having to duplicate an entire course. So if Cohort Manager is something you're interested in, there's a demo on the Training Spark website. We have full walkthroughs on our YouTube channel as well, if you're interested in finding out more. Just before I finish and open up for questions, just some closing thoughts. So if I've come across as derogatory a little bit about on-demand online learning, that's not been the intention at all. It absolutely has its place, and we create on-demand online learning for many of our clients. But I would suggest that before you commission or start building that next course, think about your audience and think about whether a cohort-based format would serve them best and serve you best as an educator, depending on what you want to achieve and what the kind of transformation you're trying to help your learners on. My other challenge would be to potentially do both and charge different prices for each. Just give it a try. Do consider live workshops as part of your course. What the beauty of cohort-based learning is the social aspects. It really is. And so if you've got people together, studying together, use that to your advantage if you can. Then finally, I would whether this was a talk about cohort-based learning or not, I would always advocate of thinking about experiences over content. And it not only helps you in terms of impact, but it can also have a big impact on your bottom line as well. So there's the case for cohort-based learning. I hope it's given you lots of food for thought. Do connect with both myself and Martin on LinkedIn. You can find us on there. We do have a Training Spark newsletter. Again, feel free to join us, and we'd love to keep you informed of all the stuff that we're going on with. But I'd love to open it up for questions. So thank you.
Thank you both. That was amazing. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to put them in the Q&A. I see that we already have quite a few really good questions. So the first one, is there a best size group to include in a cohort? This participant has 10 to 11 person group in a beta program, and they're struggling to get engagement.
One for you, Martin, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I find 8 is a number that works really well for me because there's enough critical mass that people don't feel like they're going to be answering every question, but they've also got the space to ask their question. I sometimes do it up to 10, but I don't like it to get that big. It just starts to get a little bit more unwieldy. Having said that, I think it probably would depend a little bit on what it is that you're talking about and who it is that you're talking to. So how engaged are they at being there in the first place? But 8 is a group size that I find is right in my sweet spot.
And I guess there's also opportunity to run potentially 2 calls back to back as well. So if you wanted to split them up, and give people the option to which one they choose to attend.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said earlier, I run 2 groups of 8 in parallel at the same time. So typically I'll go one group on a Tuesday, one group on a Thursday. But I would then try and stack several versions of that running at the same time. As a provider, commercially for me, if I can get 3 or 4 cohorts on a Tuesday, 3 or 4 cohorts on a Thursday, then it's happy days.
Great, thank you. Another question I think is for you, Martin. Do you use Zoom or Teams, or what platform do you use for live workshop sessions?
Yeah, so both is the short answer. I would sometimes I have clients that lead that decision for me, so they may have a chosen platform. My personal preference is Zoom, but I actually work across Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Adobe. So I'm kind of technology agnostic in that sense. And then, as Andy said, one of the things that we do is we then upload the video recording back into the online tools so that that's there as a resource for people embedded into their learning tool going forward.
Great, thank you. What are some things that you use for metrics or analytic tracking?
Do you want to talk about the technical side of that, Andy? I mean, I'm interested in completion rates. I'm interested in learner feedback and the collation of questions. Andy will be a way better place than me to talk about the technicality of kind of how that information gets to me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, like, for example, Martin's platform, we've created our own kind of reporting suite that we use. So it tracks in terms of completion through the course itself, but where they're at those stages. So we're able to split Martin's course and identify his week by week. So we can see progress in all of those. And then we also do, for example, one thing we found that's quite powerful is we try and do confidence checks. So we do a confidence check right at the beginning. How confident do you feel that you could engage in a conversation with your manager about finance? And so we ask them at certain stages. So it's not foolproof. It has its flaws as a metric, but I think it allows us just to sense check where we're at with things. And I think it's considering the metrics in the round. So we're looking at completion, but we're also looking at confidence, and we're also looking at attendance in terms of the live sessions as well. So I don't think there's one killer metric that we use, but it's just about trying to find that balance between the technical ones and the course related ones.
Awesome, thank you. Does Cohort Manager work with multi-sites?
I'd have to double check that. It should do. But what I will do is I will check that, and I will make sure it's one of the FAQs. I'm not the technical director of the business, but I will check that, and I will make sure it's listed as an FAQ tomorrow morning on the Cohort Manager website.
Great, and we can include that in our follow-up email as well. Let's see. This one again is for Martin. What is the range of an average cost that they should charge for cohort courses?
Oh, good question. So I think it would vary. It depends on what your end market is. So I would deploy cohort-based courses into organizations where they are paying for their cohorts rather than selling individual places on those cohorts. So that slightly changes the commerciality of it. But so I suppose if you think about, so I'm talking about economically, I'm going to deliver 5 45-minute sessions per cohort, and so just around kind of 4 hours of my time, if you like. I would be able to charge a cohort at slightly more than I would charge a full day in-person workshop.
I think with this, I mean, that's the killer question, isn't it? And I think that's also something that so many online course creators struggle with, is how much to price for it. I think it's about, obviously, use the cost factor, how much your time, that's one bearing. I think it's all about the value as well. So what's the value that someone will gain from taking your course? And if it's something quite small, it's understanding what the impact is going to be. Well, how transformational is that going to be? And therefore you can try and quantify that value. If it allows you, for example, to get a new job or get a promotion that is going to, is it going to get you an extra £30,000 a year or $30,000 for a year? Then all of a sudden you've got something. Okay, so it's how you present that business case, but that isn't a that's not a cohort-based course almost problem. It's a product question in a way.
I think to maybe answer the question slightly differently, it's very economically viable. It's very commercially viable as a delivery method, and partly because you're using this tool, the capital investment's been made in that tool, and that's doing the heavy lifting. So it's commercially very viable, and it's a strong part of the armory, and it sits alongside more traditional delivery methods as well.
Great. Next question is, how should someone deal with high demand and general pricing strategies?
Okay, if you're getting high demand, that's a lovely problem to have, I would suggest. So if you've got high demand, well, the key thing is raise your price. You know, like anything else, it's demand and supply. The other thing as well is, can you find a way to put on more courses, either through yourself or with, you know, associates? That's also one. I think the beauty of cohort-based learning, cohort-based courses, as Martin's done it, is the online materials, the content is still doing the heavy lifting. So although they're getting the essence of Martin and the way he teaches in video content, it's not actually him. So, you know, if Martin was to deliver all of that via Zoom, you know, you're talking 40, 50 hours of Martin's time, whereas it goes down to 4 or 5. So, you know, if you're in a position where you've got the demand to spend all your week delivering groups to cohorts of learners, you're in a very good position, I would argue. And you can pay a lot of people to do a lot of things to help you as well.
It's scalable, you know, it's massively scalable. And as I say, for me, commercially, what makes it even better is if I could stack multiple cohorts delivery into the same day. There's an old adage just on pricing, isn't there? If 3 people say no to you based on price, then you've found the right level. You don't want everyone to accept your price.
Good answer. That's awesome. Okay. Our next question, somebody has a course built on LearnDash and they think that cohorts style learning would be beneficial for them. What is the first steps they should take?
So there's 2 things. You've got the technical and then you've got the content. So I would certainly, if you're thinking of from a content perspective, as I say, just map out your course, you know, so map out and think about as it stands now, but think about what kind of schedule would make sense for your learners. So typically most of the courses we build are typically between 2 and 6 weeks, I would say. So 2 is where it's almost like a sprint. You know, you want to get someone to an outcome quite quickly. 6, maybe 6 to 8 is where it's a much more involved program. So that, for example, the personal branding one, it takes a lot more time to build your personal brand and to work out your values and how you present yourself and to have communication. So I think first think about what kind of time frame is going to create the most conducive outcome, because you want ultimately people to benefit from whatever you're doing. So that would be the course. And then you can try and map all your existing elements to that format and that kind of weekly cadence, and then work out if I'm going to do calls as part of this, where am I adding the real value? What's the kind of stuff that I can be talking about, or I can ask my students about, that are really going to make those calls really valuable and worthwhile coming to? I think people think, I really want to go to that because I don't want to miss that. So that's the content perspective. From a technical perspective, my answer would be to have a look at Cohort Manager, you know, because that's the way you can deploy that. It's a plugin for LearnDash. You can download it, get it up and running, and that way you can start to build your cohort workflow and test it with an audience and see what comes back and see what feedback you get.
Great, thank you. Another question, can the training content be pre-recorded and have a moderator available for questions, or should it be live always?
I mean, we have pre-recorded video embedded in the self-study tool anyway, and then the point of difference is the live call. I would come back to one of my 4Fs, so the flexibility element. If it's pre-recorded, you're not allowing people or enabling people to feel like they can ask their specific question. So I'm not against pre-recorded video content as part of the overall experience, but I would still, I believe there's huge value in the subject matter expert or experts joining the dots between those calls. Because I think as well, don't lose sight of the fact what you're creating is the community for those learners to come together and talk to each other as well. So Andy's talked about some of the technicality of how they can do that in the system, but you can't beat a good old-fashioned human conversation from time to time.
Great, thank you. The next question is talking about the length of your courses. So I know you mentioned they were 45 minutes each, roughly. Maybe you want to expand upon like the number of courses that you have for someone to move through it.
Yeah, so I suppose so they would go through 4 blocks. So we would have 5 calls, 4 blocks in between them. Typically, we do it week by week. So effectively, it's 4 weeks of elapsed time. The amount of time I'm going to ask someone to commit will vary based on the amount of knowledge they come into the course with, the confidence that they already have, and how well they adapt to using the material. But I would typically guide people that I'm going to ask them to do between an hour and an hour and a half of self-study each week, and a 45-minute call on top of that. So I'm looking for people to do roughly to give me between 2 and 2.5 hours of their time every week. Now, forward-thinking employers have ring-fenced that time for people, but that doesn't happen everywhere. So, kind of some flexibility again is the key. Knowing the audience and knowing what's driving that demand is partly how you'd need to answer the question about what your structure is going to be.
Great, thank you. The next question, if you are working with a larger group, are you able to manually assign people to different cohort groups? Or is it an automatic thing?
Yeah, so it depends on how it depends on the enrollment method. So, for example, what we do when we use Event Manager in WooCommerce is a specific day ties into a specific LearnDash group. So it automatically goes through, and then the cohort workflow that's built in Cohort Manager applies to the group. So that it depends on the enrollment method in essence. And I'm sure that I don't have a lot of experience with Groups Plus, which is another LearnDash product, but I imagine that's got enrollment methods which people end up in specific groups. So, for example, one group might be Finance for Non-Finance Managers course, June 2024, cohort 1. So as long as you label it as that, then and filter people through to that should work well.
And I do have people. So as I say, one of the benefits of running 2 in parallel is, let's just say something happens in someone's life and they can no longer make the Tuesday sessions. Well, we would always invite them into the Thursday sessions. So that's one of the benefits of enough critical mass in the number of cohorts, to give you the flexibility to move people around.
Great, thank you. This next person plans to have their courses open at all times, but also like to have social groups open for them. What is your recommendation for how that works, having pre-recorded courses and then also live cohort groups?
I think if I'm interpreting the question right, so we use closed courses in LearnDash, and we use, I think it's closed social groups in BuddyBoss. So what we find is that people are still they can only see the forum or social aspects that are relevant to that course. So they don't blend across lots of different cohorts. They don't get to see other cohorts in action, but they have lots of social elements that relate to just their specific course. If I haven't interpreted that well, and you want to have any specific questions, just email us at Training Spark and we can help.
I'd also throw into that one, from a security perspective, one of the big things that you want people to buy into is the fact that they're going to be recorded as part of the live calls, and then that's going to be a resource. And people are often more resistant if that is a sort of generic, ubiquitous resource rather than being specific to that group of people that they are in a cohort with. So I find I have no pushback against being recorded and uploaded as part of a small closed group. It would be a different story if I was effectively opening that up to a broader number.
Great, thank you. We do have 1 minute left. The next question, is there a way to allow people to only make comments on the cohort they're in? That way people in other cohorts can't see the comments that are in that specific one.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. So they can only see what they're on. As an administrator, so for example, on one page, there might be comments from lots of different cohorts, but only the administrator and Martin can see that. The cohort member themselves, the learner, can only see the comments from the group that they are in. And if anyone wants any tips on how to do that, again, just drop us a line through the Training Spark website, and we're more than happy to provide some guidance on that.
Great, thank you. I think we have one final question. How do you manage learners who fall behind?
A good question, really good question. It's something that I wrestle with actually. So in general, it's not a huge problem. What we talked about earlier in terms of groups, almost self-policing, and that sense of being part of a community has a huge bearing in terms of people doing it. But as I say, sometimes there's not a lot you can do about it. So quite often, or say quite often, when it has come up, I would try and take a conversation offline with that learner about whether or not it's appropriate for them to carry on, or whether they want to slot back into a future cohort. But I would generally give people every opportunity. So I would say, catch up with the recordings, catch up with the content. If you get to hear by next week's session, then we're good to keep going. Or would you like to flip into the other cohort that's running at the same time? Would that help you? Because ultimately, what I want is people to complete the courses and to engage and to benefit. And sometimes, occasionally, it's just not appropriate for someone to carry on. I had it in one of the most recent cohorts that I ran. They'd been ill, they'd been off sick, they just weren't able to do what they needed to do. So they're actually going to come on a future cohort now. So, you know, I guess you would find a natural place for it. What I try and really do, though, it's not school. You know, this is not formal education. So you don't want to be too kind of heavy-handed in terms of stuff like that, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you. I think that was a great question to end on. Thank you both for this, and thank you everybody for all of your questions. These were great questions. So thank you for joining. Do you guys just want to say your contact information one more time? People find you on LinkedIn or email?
Yeah, for myself, LinkedIn is a great place to go. If anyone has any kind of technical questions about the setup or anything around cohorts generally, if you go to the Training Spark website, you can submit a form there and just get in touch via the website.
Yeah, and same. I'm more than happy to answer questions both about the format, but also about this specific stuff that I do. LinkedIn's the place to get me. So Martin Meller, I think that's just my handle. But Andy had the QR codes earlier in the slideshow, didn't he?
Great. Thank you guys both. Thank you everybody for your interest in implementing cohort-based learning and learning more about it. We will be sending a recording of this webinar to all of you soon. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to that. So I hope everyone has a great rest of their Tuesday. So thank you again, Andy and Martin.
Thanks, everyone.